This is Shalom World Podcast.
Have you ever thought about the clash between our digital world and what's right and wrong? That's where The Porn Disaster comes in, a series that dives into one of society's most hush-hush topics. Get ready for some real talk as we dig into the ups and downs of today's tech-driven desires. Kids, relationships, recovery, we're not holding back. From the Catholic Church's take on porn to why our brains get hooked, we cover it all. Join us as we chat about the messy stuff, the good, the bad, and the uncomfortable. Hosted by Patricia Keane, we've got an expert panel here to chat about porn addiction, what it does, how it affects us, and how we can heal.
Hello, my name is Patricia Keane and you're very welcome to Shalom World. We're coming to you today from Maynooth, County Kildare, Ireland, and you're very welcome to the second part in our series of The Porn Disaster. Our episode today is about porn addiction. I want to introduce you to my guests today.
Dr. Kielty Oberlin. She's from Ireland, doctorate in psychology and master's in counseling, specializing in eating disorder recovery. Father Chris Hayden, priest from the Diocese of Ferns, Ireland, spiritual director, St. Patrick's Seminary, Maynooth. Father Alan Hoffa, priest from the Diocese of Allentown, USA. He has BA in philosophy and master's in divinity. Gerard O'Donoghue. He is an engineer from Ireland, counseling parents and creating awareness around pornography.
In our first episode, we discussed, is it addiction? Is it not an addiction? Where does it fall in on that? So Kielty, I'm going to go to you for the first question because you are the clinician here. You're dealing with it, the effects of pornography in the lives of young people at a clinical level. So can you just define the meaning of addiction for us?
In simple terms, because it's a complex question, I know it sounds simple, but for clinicians, it can be complex because it's not a I'm addicted or I'm not. There's actually a journey. It's a process. So it's when we look at it around all addictions, it's a breakdown of the relationship between a person, place, or thing. So we could apply that to food, to alcohol, to pornography. And we're seeing more and more that people with pornography addictions are showing these signs that, it's taking away their quality of life. It's creating mood, psychological issues around mood disorders, concentration. It's breaking down in relationship with self. And at different phases, we can see, like with young people, we can see those consequences, porn addiction. So another thing that I'd like to point out is from the diagnostic, from the ICD, which is under the WHO, which in Europe, we tend to diagnose disorders according to the ICD. In the US, we use the DSM, the Diagnostic Statistic Manual. Porn addiction is under the umbrella. In the ICD, it is compulsive sexual behavioral disorder. In the DSM, it's under the heading, you'll see it under psychosexual disorder. Now so it's wonderful. We've made progress, that it's diagnostically for clinicians. But I think for those of us in the real world, like living in the real world, pornography isn't recognized in and of itself. It's not like where we are with alcoholism. What that means is for people living in the real world, it almost seems like there is no porn addiction. In fact, if you do a Google search, I saw somewhere in preparing for this, porn addiction in the DSM, and it says it is not in the DSM. So that's a big issue because a lot of misinformation can go around, and that's what I hope the series that today we address that. So it is a breakdown of the relationship with person, place, or thing. Father, you can speak to this really well.
I think one of the big things that we also find is when people find themselves in addiction, they're going to find refuge or connection to something. And instead of especially as we would say in from a faith perspective, in someone, the person of Jesus Christ, but also in what we were intended for as human beings, in being connected with one another. And so this is completely extracting a person from real relationship, and they're going and finding relationship in this thing. And because of the complete accessibility to pornography, it completely takes a person by hold, and they're not able to get out of it. And that's addiction. When you are completely taken over, when you're a slave to something, and that is when we get to the top grade, and when we talk about pornography addiction. Now, we also talk about getting there, and that there is a pathway to get there, and not all persons who view pornography are immediately addicted, but the quickness to which a person can get to addiction. That is why this is so serious. And when we talk also about all of these things, like we talk a lot about drug addiction or alcohol addiction or other addictions that are more notifiable in society, it's taken us so long to get to those places. How many lives have been lost? How many people have been affected? Families. That's why this is so important of what we're doing here today, because we're bringing it to light sooner than waiting on our heels and waiting for things like the DSM to come through with these official terminologies. There's all things that it's wrapped up into why, and we could go on for many, many sessions just about that alone. But for brevity's sake, as we're here today, this is holding all of the characteristics of leading to addiction. We need to address this so that people understand its importance and don't find them addicted to this issue.
Father, you wanted to?
Yeah, I think in view of what Father Allen has just said, and also what Kielty said a moment ago, our concern here in this conversation fundamentally is a pastoral one. We're not trying to solve a clinical riddle. We're not engaged in the semantic task of carefully defining addiction. The whole question of what is classified, if it's classified, then it's a recognised disorder and funding becomes available, and there's a whole political and economic reality there. But our task is pastoral, and whatever about the end result regarding the niceties of addiction and that whole language and classification, porn is harmful, and the jury is in. The harm is being done, and that's our concern. So yes, if we have great precision of language, it's helpful. But even absent that particular clinical precision, there's simply no doubt about the harm of pornography. So if somebody comes up to you and says, "What's the harm? It's not formally an addiction." No, there are lots of people who suffer very, very grave harm in a range of areas without necessarily being addictive.
Does the same issue of denial exist with porn? For example, in my practice, I've only come across one person that told me that he was addicted to pornography. And that's the only person I know. But I know hundreds of people that have alcohol addictions, and, they're addicted to different types of drugs and so on. But when it comes to pornography, it's like it's totally stonewall silence.
There was I saw a clip where Jordan Peterson was asked this at one of his venues, and he said, and he thought about it, and he said, look, with porn, he said, you're not exactly going to walk around with a t-shirt and say, I masturbate to porn. He says, people know it's inherently wrong. It doesn't need to be explained, like what you were just saying there, that, how is it defined? You know it, and it's nothing to be proud of, and men aren't proud of it. So yes, there is a denial there. It's something that among men, it's not discussed like that they're watching porn or whatever. Like it's definitely hidden.
I think one of the key pieces, and it's important why Kielty's here, from a clinical standpoint, there are so many other things that could be going on in a person's life that show the same type of affect realities that a person who is struggling with porn addiction or the excessive use or the habit of viewing pornography. One of the areas where it comes out more is usually in the intimacy or lack thereof between persons. And if between a husband and a wife, a boyfriend and a girlfriend, just not saying that we're endorsing, sexual realities between, a boyfriend and a girlfriend, but it does come out, it shows. And even as parents see the affect of their children, it's one of those things where the healthy conversation is what allows us to bring out the realities that there's something that's changed about me. What is it? And as we break down what those things are, the question sometimes just needs to be blankly asked, are you viewing pornography? Because that then explains so many of the different things that maybe 20 years, 30 years ago, when you used to say, this is the list of things that could be wrong with a person because they're showing these signs. Now, there's so much in this realm of pornography and how it affects the person that is so important to take into consideration. But the difference is that it's not being seen because of the intimate nature of persons with their sexuality.
Father Alan, part of the Integrity Restored program, you have a psychologist, Peter Kleponis, yes, and he has a PhD in psychology, and you work with him on Integrity Restored. So I'm just going to hand it over to you regarding his practice and what has happened there.
Integrity counseling services in the state of Pennsylvania is growing exponentially. Before COVID, Peter was in a practice of his own. He did multiple aspects regarding marriage and family therapy, but then also sexual addiction therapy. And now their practice has turned primarily with the add-on of multiple clinicians after COVID, especially because the need is so great. COVID really did a number on people because of the isolation with pornography, and has brought more to the forefront that as people are trying to come out of all of the things that we got caught up in during COVID, they can't get out when it comes to this issue of pornography, so they're seeking more professional help. And when we look at Integrity Restored, it is the balance. As a priest, I know that there's only a certain place to where I can go in the help that I can offer a person who comes to me struggling with this issue. But then I also know when it needs to be handed over to the clinician to be able to go in there and do those diagnoses. And as we're talking about this issue of addiction, I think it's something that's very important to note that, especially when I speak to priests, oftentimes we're a first touch point in sacramental confession when a person comes in and says, I'm viewing pornography. And that's really good. What I caution priests against is for both themselves and the person who's coming with the struggle not to self-diagnose addiction. That's very, very important. Sometimes even as a person discloses to another, for instance, a spouse to their spouse, and the spouse affected says, you're addicted. No, you don't know that unless you are a clinician. Let the clinicians diagnose the addiction, see the problem with the pornography, and get it addressed, and know that it can be handled from a multifaceted vantage point.
Viewers are going to be looking at two priests sitting there, and they're going to be thinking, well, are they just talking about Catholics? You know, is this a Catholic organization? I know in speaking from you that you also do retreats. And you open up those retreats to all different denominations. What's that like for the people that come together with these issues?
One of the things that I've always found as a priest, especially working with other faith denominations, other denominations within Christianity and outside of Christianity, is the healthy bond that we share is what we agree upon. And one of the things that I found in what we do in trauma healing retreats, which is to help spouses of porn addicts who are experiencing betrayal trauma find that healing in their life. We've had people from all across the world who have come in virtually to those retreats, and people who are Catholic, Christian, and other religions, and not claiming any religion at that moment. But what they are affected by is the fact of they've had a traumatic wound that's hit them because of someone else's use of pornography that's very close to them, and that betrayal trauma is real. And so we focus on the fact of you have been affected. You've been affected in mind, you've been affected in heart, in body, and yes, even soul. And there's even been levels of conversion through that work as well. So it is not a Catholic issue. It's not something that just the Catholic Church is bringing up. It truly does affect everyone. And again, it does not discriminate. And I think, especially in some ways, those who are trying to be closer to the Lord, this is one of the evil one's new tools to be able to try and extract people from a closer relationship with God.
There was a report published in 2010 by the Witherspoon Institute in the United States called The Social Costs of Pornography. And in the introduction, they say this report has been contributed to by atheists, agnostics, through to Christians, Jews, Muslims. It's been contributed to by people from the political right through to the political left. It's across the board. So we're not talking about a kind of a doctrinal interest, and it certainly it's so far from the truth, the idea that the Catholic Church is being a little bit curmudgeonly or upset because her teachings are not being approved. This is about human flourishing. It's about what conduces to the thriving of children, young people, the vulnerable people of all ages. And another thing that I think is important to affirm, that when you see priests talking about these issues, any wisdom that I might have to contribute here, I have gleaned from reading the writings of people who are not priests, married people, clinicians, lay people across the board. So I'm just sort of sharing someone else's. These are the crumbs of the table that I have managed to pick up from people who know a lot more than I do. But if somebody says to me, well, you're only saying that because you're a priest, I'll say, well, this person I'm repeating is not a priest. This is a clinician, a mother, a father, a spouse. So the idea that it's a purely Catholic thing, it's a defensive fiction.
Father, and I want to go back to you again, and it's around the service that you have created in the Diocese of Allentown, and it's a very good example of maybe what other dioceses could start considering, because this problem with pornography, we know, is not just in your diocese, it's in our own diocese, it's everywhere across the world. So can you just take us through how this developed?
It started with a courageous bishop. Our bishop, Alfred Schlert, who is the 5th bishop of the Diocese of Allentown in Pennsylvania, as our vicar general, actually put his backing behind this. And he saw that I had the passion after this invitation was given for integrity restored for me to get involved. And after we had priests in our diocese trained through the clergy intensive, which is a 4-day intensive learning and training that we give to priests so that they can have a much deeper understanding of this issue, we came back and we said, Bishop, this needs to be something that we are very intentional about in our diocese, because the information needs to be shared, and we need to make sure that we're taking this from every vantage point, because it affects everyone, so that we're interconnecting with all of our diocesan offices, diocesan activities. And it's not going to be the thing that people hear over and over, but behind the scenes, we're doing the work, and then we bring to the forefront the help that is able to be accomplished. So we formed the Lumen Christi Commission in our diocese, and we're looking at everything from education models and curriculum and things for our young people, to our teenagers, to our college students, to our young adults, to marriage and family preparation, to our safe environment programs, to our seniors, everyone through, and it is focused on our diocese, and it is one of the principal commissions within our diocesan model. And it all started because our bishop found it so important that he doesn't want souls being lost to this evil anymore.
What was it that impressed him to do this? Because, you have the Catholic schools in America are private Catholic schools, and you pay to go there.
Correct.
So was he getting feedback? Where were the sources of feedbacks coming from that he decided, okay, this is a problem?
I think if there is a single priest out there in the world who says that pornography is a problem, he either is deaf or he doesn't hear confessions, because that's the first touch point for so many of us. In the confessional, we hear it. And as a bishop, and he was a parish priest before he became a bishop, he heard it. And there are all different types of residual issues, situations. Again, we talk about things, for instance, with the clergy sexual abuse crisis. Many priests, in perpetrating, they were viewing pornography. There are situations where young people are getting in trouble in schools, and when they finally drill down at what's happening, pornography is sometimes connected to those situations. He is also a canon lawyer. He knows that over 50% of the tribunal cases that were being processed in our diocese and in dioceses across the world, over 50% have as a root cause for the dissolution of the marriage, pornography. So the factual realities of what we encounter, this is one of the biggest things. It overwhelms all of the other concerns that there are when it comes to sin and things that are separating our people from the core things that we want as church, the constitution of the family, holiness of life, the road to being saints, which is what we're all called to be. And so when the opportunity came that there is something that is focused, something that is well developed, something that is bringing in not only the teachings of the church, but also the scientific world with the clinicians and with the neurobiology, it was immediate that this was something that we had to be a part of, and we haven't stopped, and we continue to grow each and every day, and I'm so thankful.
Has the example of the bishop, has it had a positive influence on priests in taking up this mission?
I think it has. One of the things that more recently I had the opportunity, every year the bishop is called to convene his priest for continuing education. And this year I had the opportunity to present to my brother priest. It was quite an intimidating task. As our Lord has said in the scriptures, a prophet is not welcomed in his own native place. And there was a little bit of nerves that went with that, but it went very well. And it was the beauty to be able to not only present to my brother priest about this knowledge so that they all had it and were able to use it in their ministry, but then it was the pastoral moment when our bishop, as a pastoral father, not only to our people but also to his priest sons, where he stood before them and said, if you have a problem with this, I want to help you. I want to be able to assist you in getting the help that you need, because this affects priests as well. But he wants us to be in the best place to be able to then go and assist the people. So it comes from the top of a shepherd leading his sheep, leading the other shepherds who he sends out into the vineyard, out for the harvest. That's really, really important.
And we've just come to the end of our second episode. Father, I want you to finish with a prayer, please, and then I will just give an intro on what part 3 is going to be about.
We were speaking earlier in this episode about the nature of addiction and how people become addicted. Here's a prayer for those who struggle with addiction. God of mercy, we bless you in the name of your Son Jesus, who ministered to all who came to him. Give your strength to those bound by the chains of addiction. Enfold them in your love and restore them to the freedom of God's children. Look with compassion on all those who have lost their health and freedom. Restore to them the assurance of your unfailing mercy and strengthen them in the work of recovery. Through Christ our Lord. Amen.
Amen. In episode 3 of The Porn Disaster, I will be discussing porn and children. With the increase in children watching pornography as young as 8 years of age, I want to know, how are they getting access to pornography? Why are they watching it, and what's being done about it, and the influence that porn is having on their little brains? Please join us for the next episode of The Porn Disaster.
And that wraps up another episode of The Porn Disaster. Thank you to our incredible panelists for sharing your expertise and insights. And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in and being part of this important conversation. If you've been impacted by anything we discussed today, know that help is available. Understanding leads to healing, and by shedding light on these tough topics, we are one step closer to positive change. Join us next time for another enlightening discussion. Until then, take care and stay curious.
Shalom World Podcasts is now available on all online platforms, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and others.